It is time to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and former government minister, Anna Soubry, and the PR consultant, Alex Deane. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let us see what's on some of the front pages of the newspapers for you now. The Express leads with the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman's response to the criticism of the government's policies on migration from the broadcaster and former footballer, Gary Lineker. This is the front of the Daily Mail. The headline, Lineker's playing the BBC for fools. The Eye has word of wide-ranging delays to the long-awaited HS2 high-speed rail project. The Times says the delays in construction could be as long as 2 years. The Mirror calls it a huge shambles. The Guardian has seen figures suggesting that at least 500 people died last year while waiting for delayed ambulances. The Metro covers concerns for the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The Telegraph reports on concerns about sex education lessons in schools, which Ofsted says may be too explicit. The Financial Times reports that 2 Russian oligarchs are offloading their stakes in one of the country's biggest banks in order to escape Western sanctions over Ukraine. And The Star criticises Prince Harry for distancing himself from the royal family whilst also insisting it's his children's birthright to be called Prince and Princess. And we are joined tonight by Anna Soubry and Alex Deane to take us through the newspapers. Welcome to both of you. Let us start with the Daily Mail. We went through their front page there. Lineker's playing the BBC for fools. Anna, what do you read into that headline?
Well, look, I mean, the Mail just can't let this go. I think the Express has also, of course, said something. You've shown it already, Julian, their front page. And they've turned Lineker quite wrongly into some bogey figure because he has said what many millions of people think, and he is entitled to say that. And we are meant to live in a country which relishes in free speech. And I agree with Lineker on a number of things, especially today when he said that this whole row is a distraction from the real issue, which is the aptly named illegal migration bill that this government is seeking to put through the Commons and the House of Lords. And it's a terrible bill. It's probably unlawful, it's mean, it's cruel, it's unworkable, and it will not achieve what the government says it wants to achieve. And actually, that's the debate that we should be having. We should be having a sensible, grown-up debate about asylum seekers, about refugees, about immigration in general. And to be fair to Lineker, who I absolutely don't hesitate to say, I'm a huge fan of him. I love watching him when he does Match of the Day and all the other sporting events, football events that he commentates on. But I also admire his absolute work, much of which people don't know about, for the cause of refugees. And it's a considerable amount of work that he does, largely in private. And he's all round a good man and he's a hero. And what Penny Mordaunt said, by the way, which you did include in your bulletin, was absolutely disgraceful. That doesn't, I think, make any of the pages of any of the front pages today.
Alex, what do you think? Do you agree with Anna that the headlines with Lineker and quoting him is a distraction, taking us away from the actual issue that perhaps people should be discussing?
Well, it's a distraction, but it's a distraction of his making. There's actually 2 debates here which are being pushed into one, including in Anna's remarks. The first debate is whether you agree with the substance, if you agree with him about the principle being debated. And the second is whether a BBC presenter should be saying those things. And you shouldn't actually push those 2 together, as Anna did. I'm surprised to hear a barrister, for whom I have great respect, ignoring the rules, because the BBC made it very clear to Lineker last year when it disciplined him over his attacks on the Conservative Party and demanded that, action was taken over alleged Russian donations. The Executive Complaints Unit at the BBC ruled that the guidelines on impartiality did apply to Lineker and that he had broken them and that he shouldn't do it again. Now, whatever you think about the substance of his remarks, it couldn't be plainer that he'd been warned not to do this as one of the most high-profile BBC commentators and its most highly paid presenter. So whether or not you like his remarks seems to me for the second debate about the principle to be beside the point.
Do you think that he should resign? Should he be sacked?
No, I don't go for falling for heads to roll. I do think that he is now. What personally I feel sorry for in this situation is the Director General. It's very rare that my heart bleeds for a BBC apparatchik, but actually he's been put in an extremely difficult position here because, for the reasons that Anna rightly identifies, in some ways Lineker is an asset to the corporation. He's a good presenter on football. He was one of our nation's best players and is therefore richly qualified to speak about sport. But the guidelines that the unit responsible for complaints at the BBC ruled last year he had broken and ruled that do apply to him made it clear to him that their presenters are supposed to avoid party political issues and to avoid political controversies. Well, he's gone wading in with both feet in a style that, for a man that never got a yellow card on the pitch for England, seems to me rather out of place.
Anna, looking at the Express, their headline, Suella Braverman blasts Lineker, and you also mentioned Penny Mordaunt in the Commons, her attack on him as well. It's a bit of a tit-for-tat and public row now, isn't it?
I mean, it's unedifying. I mean, I get quite agitated about what Penny Mordaunt said because I just thought it was really cheap and pathetic, because whatever you think about Gary's views on refugees and the illegal migrants bill, he was one of England's finest footballers. He's a world-class footballer. He won a Golden Boot, and as Alex rightly says, he never got a booking. It was an outstanding example to young football players and just generally.
But Anna, sorry, just to come in there, Anna, what do you make?
Penny Mordaunt was outrageous.
But what do you make of the Home Secretary saying that his remarks were flippant and lazy?
Well, coming from Suella Braverman, the woman who went into the Daily Mail and said that 100 million people were about and could potentially come to our country seeking asylum, which is not true. That is a false figure. At the very most, it's 25 million. And even then, that is a ludicrous exaggeration. And she went on to say it could be billions of people coming to our country. This is the language from the playbook of UKIP. That's where that's come from. So Mrs. Braverman really should not be lecturing anybody about their language. She, of all people, and she forgets she's the Home Secretary, one of the highest officers of state, and she should conduct herself accordingly and actually stop playing the man and start playing the actual issues, which is this bill, which is a bad bill. It won't work. It's cruel and it's also unlawful.
Alex, itching to come back there.
No, Gillian, the issue is on debating the substance. I agree with Anna, that's where we should focus. But if you want to debate the substance, then the wrong way to start the debate with someone with a high profile like this is to make comparisons with 1930s Germany, which is exactly what Lineker did. And Anna may well have...
No, it was only the language, Alex.
Forgive me, I listened to you.
Alex, it was language.
Listen while I speak, I hope. But I was making the point
Be
that...
factually accurate, Alex.
No, of course it's not. He's plainly hinting at the Conservative government, which won an 80-seat majority at the last election. I know you don't like the people who are now in government. I know you don't like the fact that it won an election, but it did. And it's nothing like the rise of the Nazi Party. And I think it's extraordinary and irresponsible.
He didn't say that.
Yes, that there's any... Of course he did. Well, that's what a comparison
he didn't, Alex.
Germany's meant to say.
No.
And that's why the Jewish Chronicle today has a very powerful piece about, shame on you, Gary Lineker, for trivialising the Holocaust and for making this kind of comparison. And for you to justify it, Anna, really surprises me.
Well, it's not language I would use, but I absolutely defend his right to say it. But let's be factually accurate. What he was criticising was the use of language. He then drew an analogy, which I wouldn't have done, with the 1930s and what was happening in Germany. But I do understand the argument, and there are many people in the Jewish community who have backed what he said, some of them eminent scholars, because there was a lightening of what Hitler and the Nazis did was they demonized Jews. And you are seeing that, and you have seen it, not necessarily by leading members of the government, but elsewhere in British politics, the demonizing of people who are fleeing war and terror, who are looking for places of safety and sanctuary, and the demonising generally of immigrants. And it's hugely concerning and it's not acceptable. And Lineker is absolutely spot on when he talks about language. I wouldn't have used his terms, but I defend his right to say it.
I appreciate the distinction you make, and it's a reasonable one, that you wouldn't have used the terms, but you've got a great deal of empathy and you see all manner of life in the courts. You can imagine how Suella Braverman, married to a Jewish man, direct descendant of Holocaust survivors, feels when this kind of comparison is made to her, can't you?
No, it wasn't aimed at her. But I don't have a problem in criticising Suella Braverman, as I've just done, for the use of her language. She has talked about swarms of immigrants on our coming over into our country. She has used language, as others have done, at the most senior level of government, which is not acceptable and doesn't let us have a proper grown-up debate. And that is what we need to have. We need to have a fact-based debate, Alex. We need to talk about the fact it is 45,000 people. It has risen, by the way, since apparently we took control of our borders by leaving the European Union. And the state that we are in is that Sunak is having to go over to France tomorrow to talk to Macron to try and repair damaged relations with the French, to try and settle and sort out what ultimately is a human tragedy. People
Anna,
so desperate, they get into boats to come to our country for a better life. That's why they come here, overwhelmingly.
Anna, I'm just going to give Alex the last quick word. Do you think, as the Daily Express is suggesting, that Gary Lineker should be made to say sorry, just very quickly?
No, I don't. I just think he should behave from now on. And I think that confusing people who are desperate with people who would prefer to come to this country, preferring to be here rather than being desperate, you're not desperate if you're coming from France, I think really doesn't serve the debate that Anna wants to have so much very well at all.
OK, this debate could go on and on quite clearly, Alex and Anna. For the moment, thank you.